software ecosystem as well.
Yep.
Because very often this could be the injection point as well, right?
Yep.
For certain malicious code. So
Yep.
running that and trying with purple teaming, try to identify as well what kind of telemetry do you get, how would you do investigation around that, and starting to learn about that, because that's not the future. It's happening right now, and we start to see more and more attacks around that. And getting hands-on and building this muscle power.
Runtime security has been top of mind for a lot of people, but a lot of people don't even understand what runtime security is. So I had Sergej to have this conversation with me. He has been in Deutsche Bank, and now currently he works for Sysdig. We were talking about what runtime security is, how cloud security has evolved. What do we know about cloud native as it stands today? Apparently, it turns out containers only run for 1 minute now. Who would have thought? How do you even do instant response to that? So if you are someone who works in security operations or trying to look at cloud native runtime security, this is the episode for you. Or if you know someone who is considering looking into runtime security and wants to understand what that is, this is definitely something I'll share with them as well. Now, as always, if you have been listening or watching Cloud Security Podcast episode for a long time, and this is probably a third or fourth or fifth episode, I would really appreciate if you can drop us a follow, subscribe if you're on an audio platform like iTunes or Spotify, or if you're on video platforms like YouTube or LinkedIn, definitely give us a solid subscribe there as well. Thank you so much for leaving us reviews, and this was shot at KubeCon EU as well, so thank you for everyone who came and said hello to us as well. All right, I'll let you enjoy the episode with Sergej. Talk to you soon. Hello, welcome to another episode of Cloud Security Podcast. Today I've got Sergej. Dude, thanks so much for coming in. I really appreciate your time. And before we start, we'd love a bit about yourself. What have you been up to? How did you get stuck in cloud?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. So, look, I've spent more than 20 years in cybersecurity. And I think most of my career I've been working at Deutsche Bank, spent in the financial industry, really building cyber defense centers, running cyber forensic teams, cyber hygiene, driving investigations. And back then, I think Deutsche Bank was the third most systemic bank in the world. So it was a lot of fun just to see all those different threats and then to address all the regulatory requirements on the other hand. And then I moved to Palo Networks.
Yep.
I spent there 6 years as a field CISO covering near Central. And now I'm with Sysdig.
Okay.
And Sysdig, when they've called up, I immediately signed up, running the internal security compliance, but then also the field CISO programs. And I know how much our audience knows about Sysdig. Sysdig was one of the contributors and initial creators of Wireshark, and then also Falco. Falco is today potentially the same as Wireshark, the most adopted security tool for runtime security, being used more than 60% of Fortune 500 companies. And to build a commercial cloud security product around this runtime security portion.
Yeah, because you've been in the space for a long time, especially when you started Deutsche Bank, I think cloud was still in that adolescent stage at that point in time.
Right.
How do you define cloud native today?
So I think it's very different, right? And I have perhaps a good picture how to illustrate that, because in 10 years ago, 2016, 15, I feel managing a cloud was like managing a big train station, right? You've got this track, your virtual machines, Linux, a bit of Kubernetes potentially, and then you've got this workloads being the long-haul trains coming in, being very slow, but being very predictable as well on the other hand.
Yeah.
And our job as security was to gouge all this train station and then to check for tickets as well all the time, right?
Oh, yeah.
And today everything is completely different. I would picture this more as an airport with thousands, hundreds of thousands of drones flying around. And you have now to understand, like, what are the drones really trying to do, right? Because every small workload is a small drone spinning up and then doing a job and then disappearing somewhere. And we're talking here really about Kubernetes pods and containers, serverless. And the question is just, from a security point of view, how to approach that, because the lifespan of these workloads is really seconds and not months.
Wow.
And imagine, like, back then, I think a reboot of a server was quite of a big deal.
Oh my God.
Today we're deploying containers horizontally, globally, and we don't care if one of them is disappearing.
Yeah.
So the question is just, how does it really impact security?
Yeah.
And I feel there are, first of all, some good news. And the good news is the complexity is just creating this security by obscurity type of environment. So it's very hard as well for the attackers just to understand how to exploit certain things. But we all know that this doesn't help on a long-term basis. So you have to compensate for that. And now you have to understand really how do you track in real time as well all these workloads, focus on identity management, focus on integration to CI/CD, and really understand where this drone is supposed to fly, right?
Yeah.
What are they supposed to do? What is the blast radius if one is crashing into another one?
Yeah.
And I would say this is how the modern cloud security is being working today.
And I guess, obviously, you mentioned, which I love the transition of workload to containers to now Kubernetes. You're sitting in here in KubeCon EU as well. And it's top of mind conversation. A lot of people, and we spoke about this earlier, where Kubernetes, even though it seems to be like the first choice for a lot of AI workloads, a lot of new workload that's being produced in general, somehow a lot of people think about cloud security as, hey, I have a CNAPP or a CSPM, but like posture management is like table stake these days. I think it's expected that, if I have a cloud security or if I have public cloud or private cloud, I have cloud security. And that by generally people mean is I have a posture management tool.
Yep.
We spoke about runtime, and I think there's a transition happening towards runtime as well in terms of a lot of us seeing it. Why is runtime important now? And maybe what is it in the beginning? So people get some idea of what is it?
Perhaps just to picture as well the evolution of cloud security, we can just look back and see what happened as well with other security domains in the past. And everybody who is working in the cybersecurity domain for the last 10 years have seen this movie pretty much in the past already. Let's take the endpoint security domain as an example. So in endpoint security, back like 15, 20 years ago, I think we started just with visibility, right? Yeah. We would then try to understand what kind of configuration do we have across our server environments. We would install antivirus systems. I remember those systems where the first systems that would just spin off a couple of jobs and then scan your entire computer for 1 hour and then slow it down.
Oh, yeah.
And then come back and say zero malware detected because it was too late sometimes already. And then I remember the second generation of that was, hey, how can we really stop attacks in real time?
Yeah.
And this is where runtime security really came into the play for this traditional world. If I'm correct, I think Norton invented this first capability to block and stop malware.
Oh.
And then it was still not enough because malware and certain attacks were very smart. We couldn't really encounter for all of them.
And
so we had to get more visibility as well on the endpoint. And with endpoint detection response tools being first, I would say, pioneered by CrowdStrike back then, we saw this capability as well to provide visibility back to SOCs and try to give them the power to understand what's really happening very quickly and then to have this feedback loop as well to stop the attacks, create more new detections, preventions, and so on.
Yeah.
And I feel we're undergoing the same type of transition wave as well in cloud security. And we had this, by the way, as well across identity management, network. And let's just test it out. Let me ask you a question, right?
Yeah.
If you would have those two scenarios today, the one scenario is we assume we're secure. So you do the scans with posture management, let's say once a day.
Yeah.
And then if there's a vulnerability, you can give this vulnerability data back to your engineering group so they can patch it.
Yeah.
And the second scenario, assume breach. Assume that there will be potential supply chain compromises and you uncover them very late in your production environment because exec utils and tap actions are showing that this is real.
Yeah.
There will be zero-day vulnerabilities, which are exploited. We see just last year, 24% of new vulnerabilities were exploited before patch was released.
Yeah.
There will be AI workloads moving to production. So you have to assume breach. So if you have these two scenarios, assume breach or assume you can still keep your production environment secure, which one are you going to take?
Yeah, I think it's funny because I think it's a great question also because coming from an enterprise background, I definitely lean more on the assume breach. Also because most enterprise are already targets to begin with. And I think assuming that, hey, we prepare for 0 day always, you prepare for the worst case scenario. So I definitely lean on the assume breach side. Yeah. But I also believe that after a certain level of maturity of security, everyone becomes more assume breach. You have to, because it's almost like assuming, you read something on the newspaper today that, there's a vulnerability. And you're like, do I run this? I don't know if I had run this, or am I breached by this?
How quickly can you check that as well, right? You have to compensate for this window of exposure as well. Therefore, there's this expansion right now from this first stage I just described to the third stage, more or less. Cloud security is expanding from posture to runtime.
And to your point, the workload is getting complex as well. Now, to your analogy, you don't have trains coming, long-haul trains. We have drones coming in, which come in, come out. I think the conversation you and I had was more around as well, that containers are 1 minute now.
Yeah.
So they're only alive for 1 minute.
So this is an interesting data point as well. Let me share this a bit because Sysdig is doing once a year a study around cloud security native and usage across our customers, across open source community as well. And for this year, we saw for the first time that more than 60% of containers are living less than 1 minute. So take this, less than 1 minute.
Yeah.
How quickly can you respond? How quickly can you detect even that certain things are happening in this 60 seconds. And then another interesting data point is we saw more than 35% more non-human identities than human identities, of which more than half was never rotated. There were no multi-factor indication or anything like that. So I think it's a very, very complicated environment right now. And it just shows that it's getting much more faster and much more complex year by year, which is posing, again, a completely different challenge as well to security operations centers, because they have to compensate for all the madness or all the challenges really we have in production environment, because we were not able simply to keep up with the speed from a security architecture and engineering point.
Right? So what does runtime look like? Because you're obviously you guys have the Falco project, which is very popular. It's an open source project as well. And there's a huge community around it. I think from my understanding, a lot of defense people use it as well. I think just to give some example around some of the other complexities for runtime, I'm thinking things like hybrid cloud. We spoke about air-gapped environments. We talk, obviously we're in Europe. We'd love to hear some European context as well for what is runtime security or cloud security today. And especially with this, I guess, everything that's going on in the world as well. How do you see the cloud security evolution evolving to where we are today now?
The question I'm hearing very often is, first of all, we've got our CNAPP. We don't need a runtime. And then, how I see this is, it is a really good map. And runtime is really your radar to stay with the knowledge as well. And while CNAPP is potentially showing you this topology of your environment, runtime is really showing you the moving threads. And you need both, as we've just discussed, right? The problem is that with this first generation of CNAPPs, I think we have not really considered security operations centers. We have not considered architecture and engineering teams as the key stakeholders of these tools. And let me tell you a story there. I just had a meeting with one of the CISOs from a large bank recently, and then they would have a CNAPP with a built-in runtime capability. They would have for their on-prem environment a SIM system. They've bought for every cloud environment. They're using Google, AWS, Azure. They've bought their own SIM, Chronicle and Sentinel, and then they would try to aggregate all these different alerts and push them together into a centralized SIM again. And the question there is just, how do you really cope with this type of scenario as well, right? If you need to analyze this, if you need to understand what's really happening, how quickly can you react as well to these threats? Because just even understanding the propagation of an alert back to a SIM, it's taking a lot of time, right? Now, to go back a bit to your question, runtime security is really about getting this transparency and visibility into Kubernetes. And cloud security was always about Kubernetes itself, talking about public cloud, but then also talking about private cloud, because there's a lot of organizations out there who are considering private cloud being very important for them. And now you've just mentioned it being in Europe right now. I think there's a big initiative right now around sovereign clouds, where some of the clouds are considering to use Kubernetes to build out large private clouds. And some of them are even considering to build air-gapped environments where they also run Kubernetes, because they want to have this flexibility. They want to swap very quickly certain containers, certain projects. And this is where security is also required, because again, in the same way like a public cloud can be exposed, a private cloud can be also exposed by even an air-gapped environment, by potentially a malicious actor who can come in and then just plug in a USB stick, right? And then get access to that. And then if you think about some of these use cases where Kubernetes is being used today, windmills, defense cloud, and there's a big project in Europe right now where you have defense mobile containers running Kubernetes moving around as well. We have simply to compensate for security, because you have, again, to assume breach, right?
And to your point about adding the complexity of a container going down 1 minute, more NHI being in the environment, there's a lot. It's not just as simple as that, I know it's Ashish who logged in. I can use his credentials and I can follow the trail all the way back. But then these days, and it's always been the case, cloud, there is a delay in when you receive the log from cloud as well. So the posture management world worked when all we cared about was compliance, and all we cared about is the fact that, is my storage, whatever, S3 or blob or whatever, is that open into the internet? Oh no, all good. Everything is good. I don't have to worry about anything else. But what you and I are trying to get to as well is, because there's a lot more workload in production in cloud, whether it's Kubernetes workload, non-Kubernetes, doesn't really matter. There is a need for security operations to now have a clear picture for whether that 1 minute container, was it actually malicious or was it a false positive? Which makes me think, How does a modern incident, obviously you have a forensic background as well.
Right.
How does modern incident response look like now? Because you almost feel they used to think about, oh, I need to contain, detect. You expect the thing to be still there. Use a malware example.
Right.
If you think malware is replicating itself across the network, you're like, oh, you see it replicate.
Right.
But its container is not there anymore. So what does it look like now?
Yeah, look, I think it's very different, right? Because if an organization really embraces Kubernetes in the right way, the question is just how can you deal with this 1 minute containers? I like this term, by the way, very much. Because yes, you have first of all to understand why is it even required to do incident response in Kubernetes. And of course, it's required today because we see right now attacks happening from cloud to runtime. An attacker basically compromising some identities, moving to runtime to run certain workloads, but also the other way around. An application is being compromised, and then a workload is being compromised, and then you'll find credentials in your environment variables and so on, and just move back to the cloud and compromise and take over the entire cloud. So these attacks are starting to happen, and therefore you have now to understand how can you, first of all, prevent this, but then also detect and respond to that. And I also always feel that security operations centers incident response has to have this preventive mind as well. So everything you're doing to derive the lessons learned, as well to stop it next time again. So this DevSecOps type
feedback
of approach, right? The feedback loop. But first of all, I think the biggest challenge is if you want to do incident response, you need to have the data. Today, again, it's not just the speed of the containers living only 1 minute, but also the amount of data these containers can produce. And if you don't capture this data, it's a big problem. So you need to have some sort of a flight recorder where you can get data from the container itself, because this is where the logic of the application is happening. This is where you can find really the traces around what kind of activity happened, what was it the threat actor was trying to do, if he's fast enough to do it within 1 minute. But again, most of that is getting very automated today. And then collect as well certain telemetry around how can you stitch all this data together. Because even just trying to understand if this container is living just 1 minute, how do you map this container now to some activity in the cloud? Can you do this based on IP address? Do you even store IP addresses of these containers back then? Very simple question, but most of the organizations would just fail even based on these questions. So data, capture data, collection is very important. And then from that point of view, you need to understand how to stitch all this data together. And that's already a challenge because as Kubernetes cloud is very complicated, and I think originally security operations teams haven't really got enough experience in this space. But I think what is very important is as well, try to think incident response in cloud differently. As I've started at the beginning, we need to understand how can we automatically as well prevent a lot of the different attacks. So if you've got a really good signal to noise type of ratio, you can detect drifts and you can directly kill containers, right? You can embed yourself into CI/CD pipelines. And that's the feedback loop in the end you need. But to do this really good, you need to get the visibility and you need to be able to triage as well all the different attacks. And one last example I will leave on the table, just look at how long it took Microsoft for the last 2 attacks to find out what really happened. Trying to find out who is your patient 0? Was there any lateral movement happening? Are they still in the network? Just answering this 3 questions is impossible. And if you cannot answer this 3 questions, you have to assume breach and you have to assume the attackers being in your environment. And that's really a nightmare scenario.
And containment is not really practical at that point in time because you're still trying to figure out where else has this traveled and all of that as well.
Exactly.
I wonder, because of your background with Deutsche Bank and doing security operations there, for people who are listening to Runtime, actually maybe a good point would be, who do you see as the audience for Runtime? Security operations people?
Now look, I think I see Runtime more as a platform. And it's a platform capability because just looking, for instance, at Falco and the adoption of Falco, again, being used by 60% of Fortune 500 companies, and mostly platform engineering teams who have this requirement to collect data, but they cannot collect the raw syscalls. So they have to collect pre-filtered data. And this is where Falco is really good at, just really filtering out the right data for the cloud, indicating the right alerts as well, and providing these alerts back to whoever requires this, either security teams, security operations teams, platform teams. I think that's one use case. The second use case we see commercial Sysdig is really where Runtime is being used for vulnerability management. And let me give you an example there. We know that a lot of the code which is being used by the application is not being used in production because you just use one function from a specific library and then 90% of the functions are not being used.
Yeah.
But in case there's a vulnerability and a CVE is being assigned to this library, then you're being pushed by security all the time to patch the entire library. And that's really costly.
Yeah.
So on average, 95% of vulnerabilities are not related or relevant to application at all because they are not being used.
Yeah.
Take that. So you can put 95% of the vulnerabilities out of scope because they are not reachable by the code. They are not really used by the code. And I think that's really strong. You can do the same type of checks on code level.
Yeah.
But again, they're not as accurate as in runtime. And that's where we see as well a lot of platform security architecture engineering teams using this capability. And then I think we start to see more and more SOC teams as well, trying to understand how can we get this deep insights as well in what's really happening across the workloads so that we can tell the story and understand in case there's a signal in my cloud, what is the patch 0? Was any lateral movement happening? So all these questions have to be answered. And again, you have to be very smart about that because you have to understand how much data you capture, where you capture this data, and how you stitch it together. But I think it's more of a platform, and there are multiple use cases we're seeing from runtime.
Interesting. Because I think a lot of people confuse runtime also with the whole DAST world that came up, or SOAR came across as well. So are they playing any role in this? Like the whole, hey, I detect something in runtime and automatically something happens. And the other one is where, hey, I'm going to pull in application pieces in there as well. Because I guess a lot of people, at the end of the day, to your point, platform cares about the application. They don't really care about, hey, Kubernetes or whatever's underneath. So is runtime a mixture of all of that? Or would you say runtime at the moment for security operation is at that stage where it's primarily information from different applications?
No, I think runtime is also shifting left the different insights. So I'd love to think about runtime as a platform because the insights we're getting from runtime, they're reflecting the true reality. While if you're looking at the code level, you have to assume a lot of things. So we've talked about vulnerability management, but we can talk as well about non-security use cases. Let's talk about profiling, for instance, right? How effective and efficient is your code being executed? That's what we saw in the observability space happening for ages as well. You need to have runtime visibility so that you can code much more efficiently and effectively as well. So I think it's a platform where you start to see a lot of different capabilities on the left side. So the shift left, but then also on the right side, the security operations starting really to leverage this insights more and more for various use cases.
So the audience ultimately becomes your platform people who probably want a holistic view, which is including security, but also security operation people who have the need for, if there's a container, 1 minute container still there, I got an alert from it, I need to be able to go and investigate where that is. Hopefully there's logs for it as well.
Yeah, exactly. And then you would need to define a security operations center. What kind of logs do I want to collect? Because for instance, what we can do very effectively is if there's a specific alert, start recording of all the different signals and logs specific in the next 15 minutes for this specific particular alert, which is like a flight box recorder as well, which you need if you want to explain what really happened. Because you would not want to have terabytes of data coming per hour from your environment or from a single workload in some cases. Because it's not efficient. You can't really store this data. So you need to have the smart pre-filtering of data, what you monitor, and where it can react automatically, as close and as fast as possible to the workload. And on the other hand, you want to make sure that you collect when something happens, which is relevant. And that's something typically security operations centers would define because they know with tactics as well. This is a container escape, which is happening very rarely. So we want to definitely make sure that recording is starting. But this one is potentially just something we want to use as part of enriching our SOC data. So we don't really need detailed information. So this type of questions you would need to define together with the security operations.
And maybe just to dive one more step into the whole security operation thing, because a lot of as you said, security operation would be playing an important role in the runtime security space. So people who are, I guess we're in that phase where still the beginning of the year, people look at conferences to see, hey, what else should I be looking out for? So for people who are building a security operation program today, or at least planning for one, they obviously have an existing one. Most enterprises do, and they're doing an amazing job at on-premise, perhaps to an extent in cloud as well, as they're seeing a lot more of it come through from CNAPPs and everything else. What's your recommendation for what should be different kinds of maturity they should look in terms of uplifting an existing SOC program? What should they consider as part of their roadmap? Hey, you know what? This is where the world is going, and make sure you at least have these things. Like we obviously talk about runtime, but feel free
should I say listen into Cloud Security Podcast?
Yeah, you can definitely say that as well. But in terms of, definitely listen to the podcast. But I definitely would say for most people want to know, hey, what's the maturity levels I'm looking at in a world where containers only 1 minute, I have runtime coming up, do I even have read runtime? Because I already have CNAPP, you've answered that question. So what do you think is like for people who are starting to uplift that program from, say, maybe, actually, funny enough, because I have had conversations where people are still moving in cloud today. So people who are on-premise have done that amazing job. Moving to cloud, what should there be maturity that they should aim for in terms of, if you can, different stages that they should consider for their program to have?
Look, first of all, I guess it's very important just to get familiar with Kubernetes as well, right? And the cloud itself. There's an amazing resource out there. Actually, James just pointed me during the weekend to a great resource. It's called Code Cloud with K, where you can do a lot of this exercise and trainings as well. I really like that one. But then again, I think what's important is in the business world, we're planning for success. In security, we're planning always for failure. So we have to simulate these failures as well. And the best way to do it is just to go out and really try to experience both sides, the blue and the red team. So on the red team point of view, just try to understand how attacks would work. There are really great simulations. We're running, for instance, here at KubeCon as well, this type of exercise where we simulate MITRE attack techniques, but on the other side, show what kind of events are being generated, how you can detect this, how you can triage this. So try to experience both. And I think last but not least, I would just always encourage every company out there just to run potential red team exercises, specifically targeting these environments, Kubernetes environment, your entire software ecosystem as well. Because very often this could be the injection point as well, right? For certain malicious codes. Running that and trying with purple teaming, try to identify as well what kind of telemetry do you get, how would you do investigation around that? And starting to learn about that, because that's not the future. It's happening right now, and we start to see more and more attacks around that. And getting hands-on and building this muscle power, I think, is what we need.
And for people who are leading the security operation team, I guess having relationships between different departments, to what we were saying earlier about, is that even more important now? And is that going beyond just security, but going to applications as well?
Oh yes, I think that's really important. So back in the days when working for a large bank, you will find everything from a mainframe, Solaris server, up to the most modern Kubernetes stacks. So if incident would happen, let's say in a mainframe environment, you would just pull this system administrator who can help you explain RACF and how this entire administration and AIM permission world is working there. So you need to have and build this relationship internally. I think what's different to a couple of years ago, you've got now ChatGPT and Mistral and all these different models to explain that to you. And that's where we see a lot of exciting work. So for instance, we've implemented an AI system called Sage, whom you can just ask about the Kubernetes world while triaging a specific alert. Hey, explain me what is a namespace, right? How could the different lateral movement techniques happen now if this alert was related to a specific execution on this container? So you can start talking to that and get educated while you're triaging already a specific alert. These relationships are potentially not as important as it was in the past, but I think it's still very important because obviously these guys understand the entire architecture.
Of course, and the nuance of how many bandages were put in across where and how is something stacked up. Because to your point, a ChatGPT version may give you an ideal version, but you may have a band-aid fix somewhere that only one person in the team knows about or one particular team knows about.
Exactly. These architectural questions are very difficult to be answered. I think we start to see slowly that the AI systems are starting to understand as well the internal environment and then feed in also certain data from internal environment. That's what we start to see. And I'm very excited about things like deep research on your Kubernetes or cloud data. How cool is that? You just give it a task and it goes ahead and then comes back with a specific answer, right? This type of scenarios and capabilities we start to see. We're just piloting as well some of that with some of our customers as well. Obviously, things like hallucination and so on are very dangerous in security. So you want to make sure that you get this under control before you release this to a broader.
Of course,
we start to see very promising results here.
Interesting. Are you seeing AI being used in security operation?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Because look, especially in forensics, It's data crunching, and there's a lot of unstructured data, not just data you receive from a real-time point of view, where you've got fixed and static rules how to stitch this together, but a lot of other unstructured data around your environment, config files and things like that. So that's really powerful for SOC and specifically forensics.
Yeah, because your point, you might get a kube config file, you have no idea what it looks like or what it's supposed to be, but you just feed it to your internal chat, whatever AI thing. It can tell you, hey, this seems odd.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, because to your point earlier, people would be like, I have to go on a Google forum or Stack Overflow or subreddit somewhere to figure out what that is.
Look, in the past, we've been doing like this. You would just do this deadbot forensics. You would just try to take the hardware, create an image from that, run your log to timeline to get some sort of a timeline and explanation what happened there, carve out other data and then bring this together. So it was very difficult in the past to get this content. I think this is where we see generative being very strong. It helps with from signal to context, from signal to story in the best way. And that's what you need in security operations, because the mission of security operation is to compensate for bad security. And you have to be in the position to explain what really happened so you can go back and fix that. And that's ultimately how you can stop attacks as well. But in the past, it would take ages to do that. In the cloud, it would be today, for most organizations, I would say even not possible because you're missing some data. But I think once we start to collect the data and pair this with AI, we'll start to see much more interesting use cases going forward to explain this and have this story and be able to stop the attacks very quickly and be able as well to feed back into your detection engineering, into your CI/CD pipeline, into your engineering world as well to see how you fix certain things. I think that's where I'm very excited about.
I'm excited as well. But that's all the technical questions I had for you. I've got 3 fun questions for you as well. First one being, what do you spend most of your time on when you're not trying to assume breach everywhere? What's your favorite activity to do?
So I think it changed in the last year because I've got 3 kids and both of my teenagers.
The teenagers, okay.
I'm reading a lot of books.
Okay, fair.
Right now, how to spend effectively time with teenagers. But no, look, I love to hike and really spend my time in nature as well with family, kids, friends, potentially some seasons, so I can see that hiking the mountain.
That's not bad.
Yeah, I think that's
awesome. And second question, what is something that you're proud of that is not on your social media?
I think my drawing skills. I'm a very visual person, and I almost started.
I feel like a proper
drawing and then painting and so on. I'm really good in that, and that's sometimes good. Sometimes it's pretty bad because if you work with marketing departments and then you point them to certain aspects, they've spent a lot of work time, and you're very picky. It's not really good.
Fair. Okay. So have you always drawn? I
was drawing already as a kid, and almost started to.
Are we talking canvas drawing?
Yeah, real drawing, like pictures,
and watercolor and everything,
watercolor, but also like realistic
portraits
as well, and so on. So when I was back in Germany at school, I was deciding either to go and study physics and do a PhD there or art academy.
And so you chose physics.
And I chose something in between because my teacher was working in the financial services space and said, "Hi, you have to go to work for a bank because 80% of guys studying physics and doing PhD are anyway ending up working for banks. So go straight and it will be much more quicker path for you."
There you go. You could have had an artist for all. Sergej could have been like the artist that people never find. Do you put them online somewhere?
I have not put it. That was a question.
Fair.
I can show you. I have some on my phone.
I would definitely look. And the third question is, what's your favorite restaurant cuisine you can share with us?
I think it's really, there are 2, Indian and sushi. I like Japanese cuisine, but also Indian cuisine very much.
Together?
No, not together. But,
I'm like, wow, that'll be interesting.
This is also cooking. I'm not really good at cooking Indian food myself. I cook a lot as well. And
any favorite restaurant that comes to mind?
Gosh, I don't think that there's
so many,
to be honest. There are a lot of many. I'm traveling a lot, so it's very hard to say that there's like one single favorite restaurant.
Fair. Yeah, but I think
we're in London, so
I'm sure there'll be many over here as well. Expensive as well, I'm pretty sure. But dude, thank you so much for coming. Where can people find you on the internet to connect and talk more about runtime security?
Look, I'm on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect. Don't sell cloud security or other container security solutions to me, because that's something companies are trying to do. Being back at Palo Alto Networks, they would try to sell me firewalls, cloud security. I don't know if it's a joke or not, but please feel free to connect on LinkedIn, and I'd love to talk about cloud security, Kubernetes security. AI security is a very important topic. We have not touched on that today too much, but that's exciting. And
I'll put those in the show notes. But dude, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening and watching this episode of Cloud Security Podcast. If you've been enjoying content like this, you can find more episodes like these on www.cloudsecuritypodcast.tv. We are also publishing these episodes on social media as well, so you can definitely find these episodes there. Oh, by the way, just in case there was interest in learning about AI cybersecurity, we also have a sister podcast called AI Cybersecurity Podcast, which may be of interest as well. I'll leave the links in the description for you to check them out. And also for our weekly newsletter, where we do in-depth analysis of different topics within cloud security, ranging from identity, endpoint, all the way up to what is the CNAPP or whatever a new acronym that comes out tomorrow. Thank you so much for supporting, listening, and watching. I'll see you next time.